Snow fell silently over the broken valley, covering the land that had seen too much death. The night sky glowed faintly red from burning wreckage, and the wind carried the smell of smoke, oil, and blood. Among the ruins of machines and fallen soldiers, a lone human staggered through the snow. His name was Ethan Cross, a soldier of the Terran Defense Force, one of the last survivors of a battle that was never meant to happen. Ethan's uniform was torn, his helmet cracked, and his left arm burned from a plasma wound. His breath came out in white clouds as he limped forward, each step heavier than the last. Around him were the bodies of both humans and aliens, frozen where they fell. The war between the Terrans and the Vulpine Dominion had turned this planet into a graveyard. He stopped beside the wreck of a transport craft, its metal still glowing from the explosion. He thought he was alone until he heard it, a sound so soft it could have been mistaken for the wind. A cry, weak, trembling, not human. Ethan raised his weapon by instinct, scanning the ruins. The sound came again, closer now, like a whimper of pain. He followed it through the snow until he found a small figure half buried beneath a fallen piece of metal. It was a Vulpine child. Her fur, once a silvery white, was stained red. Her long ears drooped, and her golden eyes flickered weakly. She couldn't have been older than 10. She was clutching a broken pendant shaped like a crescent moon. For a long moment, Ethan froze. The Vulpines were enemies, fast, clever, ruthless. They had killed thousands of humans in this war. His orders were clear, no mercy, no hesitation. But as he looked at the girl, something deep inside him shifted. She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't holding a weapon. She was just a child, scared, alone, dying in the cold. Her lips moved slightly. "Please, help me." Her voice was weak, filled with pain and fear. Ethan lowered his gun. He knelt beside her, brushing snow from her face. Her fur was icy, her body shivering uncontrollably. "Don't move," he said softly. "You're going to be all right." She looked at him with confusion. "You human?" He smiled faintly, though his heart felt heavy. "Yeah, the scary human, huh?" Her small hand trembled as she reached for him. Why help me?" Ethan hesitated. He didn't have an answer that made sense. He should have left her there. But his humanity refused to die. "Not yet. Because you need help," he said simply. He tore his emergency blanket and wrapped it around her small frame. Her breathing slowed a little, but she was still fading fast. He looked around for shelter and saw the mouth of a cave not far away, half covered by ice and rock. Without thinking, he lifted the girl in his arms. She was light, almost weightless, and her fur felt cold against his skin. "Hang on, kid," he whispered. "You're not dying here." The snow bit at his face as he pushed forward. Every step was pain. His legs screamed, his burns throbbed, but he kept walking. The girl's head rested against his chest, and he could feel her heartbeat, weak but still there. When he reached the cave, he set her down gently near the wall. He found an old flare from his pack and lit it. The small fire painted the cave in soft orange light. The warmth made the girl stir slightly. "What's your name?" Ethan asked quietly. Lyra," she whispered. "Daughter of Thalor, House of Silver Moon." Ethan smiled softly. "Pretty name, Lyra. My name's Ethan." She blinked slowly, her golden eyes trying to focus on him. "You shouldn't help me." "They'll kill you." He shook his head. "Maybe. But I couldn't just walk away." For the first time she smiled, a small, tired smile that made his chest ache. He gave her some of his ration water, then wrapped his jacket over her to keep her warm. Outside, the storm raged louder, howling like the ghosts of the dead. Inside the cave, two enemies shared the same flame. Ethan watched over her through the night. Each time she shivered, he moved closer to keep her warm. He didn't sleep. He couldn't. The thought of losing her, this small life that somehow depended on him, felt unbearable. When dawn came, the light touched her face gently, and Ethan saw color returning to her fur. She was alive. Against all odds, she had survived. And something in Ethan's heart changed forever. He didn't know it then. But by saving that little Vulpine girl, he had changed not just his fate, but the fate of two worlds. The morning sun rose weakly over the frozen valley. Its light touched the snow, turning it into a sea of silver. Inside the cave, Ethan sat quietly near the small fire, watching the young Vulpine girl, Lyra, sleep peacefully for the first time since he found her. He had spent the night making sure she stayed alive. giving her warmth, melting snow for water and cleaning the wound on her leg. The cold had bitten deep, but the girl was strong. She was breathing steadily now, her fur no longer pale from frost. When her eyes finally opened, golden and bright like sunlight through amber glass, Ethan felt a strange sense of relief. She blinked at him, confused at first, then slowly sat up, clutching the blanket around her. Where am I?" she asked softly. "In a cave," Ethan said, smiling a little. "You collapsed outside. I brought you here." Lyra looked at him for a long moment, her small face filled with uncertainty. "You're a human," she whispered. He nodded. "Yeah, last I checked." Her ears lowered slightly. "Humans and Vulpines are at war. You should have left me." Ethan poked the fire with a stick, sending sparks into the air. "Maybe I should have," he said quietly. "But I didn't." She tilted her head, her expression softening. "Why?" He thought for a moment, then answered, "Because when someone's hurt, you help them. Doesn't matter what species they are." For a few seconds there was silence except for the crackling of fire. Then to his surprise, Lyra smiled, a small, shy smile that made her look even younger. "You talk strange for a human soldier," she said. "Yeah," he chuckled. "I get that a lot." The next few days were a test of survival. The blizzard outside made it impossible to leave. Ethan and Lyra lived off the few rations he had left and melted snow for drinking water. When his food finally ran out, he went out to hunt. Lyra watched him leave with fear in her eyes. "Please be careful," she said. Ethan gave her a reassuring smile. "I'll be back, promise." He came back hours later with a small animal, frozen solid. It wasn't much, but he cooked it over the fire and gave most of it to her. "You need it more," he insisted when she tried to share. Lyra hesitated, then quietly whispered, "Thank you, Ethan." He shrugged. "That's what friends do." She blinked in surprise. "Friends?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah, you saved me from loneliness out here. So we're even." Her ears twitched happily, and she giggled softly, a sound so pure it almost made him forget there was a war outside. In the evenings, when the wind howled outside, Lyra would sing old Vulpine songs to keep their spirits up. Her voice was soft and melodic, carrying warmth that filled the cold cave. Ethan listened quietly, feeling peace for the first time in years. Sometimes she told stories, tales of ancient Vulpine heroes, of spirits that guarded the stars, and of bonds that could never be broken. Ethan, in turn, told her about Earth, about oceans that stretched forever, forests full of light, and rain that smelled like new life. They were from two different worlds, yet the distance between them grew smaller each night. One evening, Lyra sat beside him staring at the flickering firelight. "My father used to say the stars listen to our hearts," she said. "If we speak with truth, they answer." Ethan smiled faintly. "Then I guess we should tell them we want peace." She looked up at him, her golden eyes full of something deep, something beyond her age. "Do you really believe peace is possible?" He looked toward the cave's entrance where the storm was slowly fading. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I believe in trying." Lyra nodded quietly and rested her head on his arm. "Then maybe that's enough." Days turned into a week. The storm finally broke, leaving behind a quiet world of ice and light. Ethan began to plan their next move. He had to find a way to send her home. But deep inside, the thought of losing her hurt more than he expected. Lyra, too, seemed to sense it. As they prepared to leave, she hesitated, looking up at him. "If we get separated, will you forget me?" Ethan's chest tightened. He crouched down and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "No, Lyra, I could never forget you." She smiled, a real, bright smile this time, and whispered, "Then I'll never forget you either." When they stepped out of the cave together, the sunlight broke through the clouds, painting the snow in gold. Two figures, one human, one Vulpine, walked side by side through the frozen world. Enemies by birth, but something stronger now bound them, a bond not written by blood or war, but by kindness, and in that bond a quiet destiny had begun to awaken. The storm had passed, leaving the land silent once again. The air was cold but clear, and the snow sparkled under the morning light. Ethan and Lyra walked together through the frozen valley, their breaths rising in small white clouds. The long days inside the cave had changed them. No longer strangers, no longer enemies. They had become something deeper, something fragile but real. Ethan had given Lyra his scarf, wrapping it around her neck to keep her warm. She smiled every time she adjusted it, as if the small piece of human fabric was something precious. "How far is your home?" Ethan asked as they climbed over a hill of ice. Lyra looked up at the sky, her ears twitching. "Not far," she said. "If we follow the river, my people will find us. They always search after battles." Ethan nodded. "Good, then you'll be safe soon." But as he said it, something in his chest ached. He didn't know why, but the thought of letting her go felt wrong. She had become more than someone he saved. She had become his reason to keep walking. Hours passed. The cold grew sharper, and the wind began to rise again. Suddenly a distant sound broke the quiet, a low hum, mechanical and deep. Ethan froze. He knew that sound too well. "Ships," he whispered. Lyra's eyes widened with hope. "My people. They found us." Ethan's face hardened. "If they see me, they'll shoot." She turned to him, panic in her voice. "No, I'll tell them you're good." "I'll tell them you saved me." He shook his head slowly. "You don't understand. They've been at war with humans for years. They won't listen." Before they could argue, the ships appeared overhead, sleek, silver, and shaped like blades cutting through the air. Snow scattered as they landed nearby. Vulpine soldiers in gleaming armor stepped out, their eyes sharp, their rifles glowing. "Stay behind me," Ethan said, placing himself between Lyra and the patrol. One of the soldiers pointed his weapon. "Human, drop your gun and step away from the princess." Ethan's heart skipped. "Princess?" He turned slightly toward Lyra. She looked down, ears folded. "My father, he's the king," she whispered. "I didn't tell you. I didn't want you to be afraid." He blinked in surprise, then smiled faintly. "Guess I've been protecting royalty this whole time." The Vulpine soldiers surrounded them. Ethan raised his hands, his gun hanging loosely from his shoulder. He didn't move, didn't fight. He could feel the tension in the air, the hatred, the mistrust. Then, from behind the soldiers, a tall figure stepped forward. His armor was engraved with gold patterns, his fur silver like the moon. His eyes were sharp, wise, and full of authority. It was Lord Thalor, ruler of the Silver Moon House, Lyra's father. The soldiers immediately bowed their heads. Lyra's face lit up and she ran toward him. "Father!" Thalor caught her in his arms, holding her close. Relief washed over his face as he whispered something only she could hear. Then his eyes turned toward Ethan, cold, piercing, dangerous. "You," he said, his voice like a blade. "A human soldier. Why are you with my daughter?" Ethan stood tall despite his exhaustion. "She was hurt. I found her after the crash. I couldn't just leave her." Thalor's eyes narrowed. "And why should I believe you?" Before Ethan could answer, Lyra stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong. "Because it's true. He saved me, Father. I would have died if not for him. He gave me his food, his jacket, his warmth. He never hurt me." The soldiers murmured in confusion. Some lowered their weapons slightly. Others stared in disbelief. Taylor's gaze softened just a little as he looked at his daughter's tearful face. Then he turned back to Ethan. "Human, do you know what you've done?" Ethan frowned. "I saved a life. That's all." The king's expression grew grave. "Among my people, saving the blood of royalty binds your soul to ours. You are no longer just a soldier. You are part of our fate." Ethan blinked, unsure what to say. "Part of your fate?" Thalor nodded slowly. "It is law and spirit. A life saved must be honored by life in return. You are bound to her, to my daughter." Lyra's golden eyes widened. "Bound?" Thalor placed a hand on her head. "Yes, child. The stars have witnessed your bond." Ethan stood speechless. The soldiers watched silently, unsure how to react. What began as a rescue on a battlefield had become something far greater, something neither human nor Vulpine could explain. The king finally spoke again. "You will come with us, human. You will stand before the council and face judgment. Your fate will be decided by the stars you have disturbed." Ethan looked at Lyra. She stepped closer, clutching his sleeve, her voice trembling. "Don't be afraid. I'll protect you this time." Ethan smiled faintly. "Guess we're even now." And as the ships lifted into the sky, carrying them away from the battlefield, Ethan looked out through the glass and realized that the war, for him, was no longer about enemies or orders. It was about a promise. A bond he didn't fully understand, but one he was now destined to keep. The flight to the Vulpine capital felt endless. The ship's engines hummed softly, and the silence inside was heavy. Ethan sat near the back, surrounded by armed guards, his wrists bound with thin energy cuffs that glowed faintly blue. Across from him sat Lyra, her golden eyes full of worry. She had refused to leave his side no matter what her father or the soldiers said. Every now and then she would glance at him, as if afraid that he might vanish if she looked away. Ethan gave her a small smile to calm her, though inside he felt uncertain. He had fought in battles before, faced death 100 times, but this was different. He had walked into the heart of enemy territory with nothing but the trust of a child. The ship descended through silver clouds and landed on a massive platform made of crystal and steel. Outside, the Vulpine capital stretched like a dream, towers of light spiraling into the sky, bridges glowing softly in shades of blue and gold. It was beautiful, almost unreal. But the people who gathered to see them were silent, their faces cold. When they saw the humans stepping off the ship beside their princess, whispers spread through the crowd like a storm. A Terran? A human with the royal bloodline? Impossible. Ethan kept his head down, following the guards as they led him through shining corridors that glowed under his boots. The air smelled faintly of flowers and iron. Finally, they reached a grand chamber, the hall of the Vulpine king. The hall was vast, with silver pillars carved into shapes of ancient beasts. At the far end, on a raised throne of crystal, sat King Thalor, ruler of the Dominion. His fur was silver-white, his eyes sharp and deep as the night sky. Around him stood the royal council, old Vulpine nobles dressed in elegant robes, their tails curled with pride. When Ethan was brought forward, the murmurs grew louder. He could feel their anger, their disbelief. To them, he was not a hero. He was a symbol of every human bullet that had taken a Vulpine life. Lyra stepped forward before anyone could speak. "Father, please."
"He saved me!"
"I was dying and he carried me through the storm. He shared his food, his warmth. He gave me life when no one else was there." The king raised a hand and the hall fell silent. He studied Ethan carefully, his voice deep and calm. "Is this true, human?" Ethan nodded once. "Yes, your majesty. I found her after a crash. I couldn't just leave her." The king's gaze did not soften. "Many of my people would have done differently if they found one of yours. You defied your own kind's hatred, even when it risked your life. Why?" Ethan hesitated, then spoke honestly. "Because she was a child. And because I'm tired of hate." His words hung in the air like fragile glass. The council exchanged uncertain glances. Some looked thoughtful. Others looked offended. Finally, the king stood from his throne. His presence filled the hall. "Among the Vulpine, saving royal blood is not a small act. Our laws are old, older than your species' first ships. To save a royal life is to become bound to that life." Ethan frowned slightly. "Bound?" The king nodded. "By the law of the stars, your soul is now tied to hers. You are connected to the Silver Moon bloodline. What happens to one affects the other." Lyra's eyes widened. "Father, you mean he's part of our family now?" The king's expression softened slightly as he looked at her. "In a way, yes. But it is not a bond of choice. It is destiny." Ethan stood silent. The weight of the words sank deep. Bound to her? To her family? He didn't understand how, but he felt it. The strange warmth that linked him to the little girl. It wasn't magic, but something older, something real. The king turned back to him. "You will stay in the royal palace until your purpose in this bond becomes clear. You will not be harmed, but neither are you free to leave. Our traditions demand we understand why fate chose this path." Ethan bowed his head slightly. "Understood, your majesty." As the guards removed his cuffs, Lyra rushed to him and hugged his arm tightly. "You're safe now," she whispered. "I told you I'd protect you." Ethan smiled faintly. "Looks like you did." The king watched them for a long moment, his eyes thoughtful. There was something in the human's calmness, something that reminded him of old legends, of bonds between species that had changed the course of history. "Perhaps," the king said softly, "the stars are not done with us yet." As the hall emptied and the night fell outside the palace windows, Ethan stood on the balcony staring up at the twin moons. He felt both lost and at peace. Somewhere inside he knew his life had changed forever. He had come to this world as a soldier, but now destiny had marked him as something far greater, a protector, a symbol. A bridge between two worlds, and it all began with one simple act of kindness. Days turned into weeks inside the shining walls of the Vulpine Palace. Ethan was given a room overlooking the crystal gardens, where silver flowers bloomed under the light of the twin moons. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful for a man who had lived most of his life surrounded by war. But peace did not mean freedom. Guards still followed him everywhere, watching his every move. Some bowed politely, others looked at him with open hate. He was the only human in a city that had lost thousands to his kind. Ethan understood their anger. He didn't blame them. What surprised him most, however, was how often Lyra came to visit. Every morning, the little princess would rush into his room with a bright smile, carrying books, fruits, or sometimes a handful of glowing flowers she had picked herself. She always said the same thing: "You shouldn't be alone." She talked to him about her lessons, her friends, and the stars. Sometimes she made him laugh with her questions. "Why are humans so strange?" she asked once, tilting her head. Ethan smiled. "Maybe because we never stop trying, even when it hurts." Lyra thought for a moment, then said softly, "Then I think that's beautiful." Her innocence was like sunlight breaking through the clouds that had long darkened his heart. Not everyone shared her warmth. The palace was full of whispers. Many nobles believed the human bond was an insult to royal blood. One evening, Ethan walked into the garden for some air. The sky was full of stars and the fountains glowed faintly blue. But the peace shattered when a sharp voice echoed behind him. "Enjoying your stay, human?" Ethan turned to see a tall Vulpine in dark armor, General Kale, one of the king's most trusted warriors. His golden eyes burned with pride and anger. "I'm not here by choice," Ethan said calmly. Kale stepped closer, his tail flicking. "You should not be here at all. Your kind brings war, not peace. You saved the princess, yes, but do not think that makes you one of us." Ethan met his glare without fear. "I don't want to be one of you. I just want to make sure she's safe." Kale's lip curled. "How noble. But the bond between you and the princess? It's dangerous. The people are afraid. If anything happens to her, the bond may destroy you both. That is why I say you should leave." Ethan's voice grew firm. "I can't. I won't abandon her." Kale stared for a long moment, then turned away. "Then you are a fool, human. And fools do not survive long among the Vulpine." That night, Ethan sat alone in his room thinking about the general's words. The bond, whatever it was, felt strange to him. Sometimes when Lyra was sad, he felt it too, like a soft ache in his chest. When she laughed, warmth spread through him. It was something he couldn't explain. Something beyond science or logic. He didn't know if it was destiny or just a mystery of this world. But one thing was clear: he was connected to her, heart and soul. As he sat by the window, a soft knock came at the door. It was Lyra. "Can't sleep?" Ethan asked gently. She nodded, her small hands fidgeting. "I had a dream. You were gone." He smiled faintly. "I'm still here, kid. Not going anywhere." She climbed onto the chair beside him, staring out at the stars. "Father says the bond means we share fate. That if something happens to me, it happens to you." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Then I'll just have to make sure nothing happens to you, huh?" Lyra looked up at him, eyes shining. "You mean it?" He nodded. "Every word." She smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder. "Then I feel safe." Ethan stared at the twin moons above, his heart heavy but calm. For the first time since the war began, he felt like his life had meaning again. But the shadows inside the palace were growing. Not everyone wanted the bond to last. In the halls, the nobles whispered of breaking it through ancient rituals, ones that required blood and sacrifice. General Kale met with them in secret, his voice cold. "If this bond threatens the kingdom, then we must test the human's heart." And so, destiny began to tighten its invisible chains. The next morning, when Ethan stepped into the courtyard, the guards were waiting. Their leader bowed stiffly and said, "By order of the Royal Council, you are to stand in the trial of honor, to prove your worth and loyalty to the House of Silver Moon." Ethan looked at them calmly.
"And if I fail?"
The guard's eyes flickered. "Then the bond will be broken. Forever." Ethan turned his gaze toward the palace balcony where Lyra stood, fear written on her face. He gave her a small, reassuring smile. "If that's what it takes to protect her," he said quietly, "then I'll face whatever trial they want." And as the guards led him away, Lyra whispered into the wind, her voice trembling with emotion, "Be strong, Ethan. Please come back." The morning sky was painted in shades of red and gold when Ethan was led into the arena of blades. The wide circle of white stone stood silent, surrounded by thousands of Vulpine spectators. Their eyes glowed like stars filled with judgment and curiosity. At the highest balcony sat Queen Celira, Lyra's mother, her expression calm but unreadable. Beside her stood Lyra, her small hands gripping the railing, her golden tail trembling with fear. The drums began to beat low and steady, echoing through the air like the sound of a war long past. Ethan stood alone in the center, his human body wrapped in simple armor given by the guards. He had no weapon, only his will. He could feel the bond pulsing faintly in his chest, warm and alive. Somewhere inside him, he could feel Lyra's fear, too. A deep voice rang out. "Human Ethan, savior of the princess, you stand accused of binding your soul to royal blood. To prove your loyalty and worth, you must face the trial of honor. If you win, the bond stands. If you fail, the bond will be broken and your life will end." Ethan nodded silently. "Then let's begin." The gates opened with a groan. From the shadows stepped General Kael, his silver armor gleaming like a mirror. His twin blades shone under the sunlight. The crowd gasped. "He's fighting Kael?" someone whispered. Ethan's eyes hardened. "So this is your test." Kael's expression was cold. "No hatred, human. This is duty. Show us your heart." Without warning, Kael moved, fast as lightning. His blade slashed through the air, but Ethan ducked, rolling aside. Dust rose under his boots. He had fought aliens before, but Kael's speed was beyond human limits. Kael attacked again, a dance of fury and grace. Sparks flew as Ethan barely blocked with a fallen guard's spear. His arms ached, but his resolve didn't break. Up in the balcony, Lyra cried out, "Stop! You'll hurt him." But her mother placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "He must fight for the bond, my child. This is the way of our kind." Ethan's breathing grew heavy. Every strike from Kael was faster, harder, deadlier. But the human refused to give up. When Kael swung his blade in a downward arc, Ethan caught it with the shaft of his spear, twisting it aside. He countered with a punch to the general's chest, enough to make Kael stumble back a few steps. The crowd gasped. Kael's golden eyes flickered with surprise. "You're stronger than I thought." Ethan wiped the sweat from his brow. "I didn't come here to fight for glory. I came to fight for her." The words echoed across the arena, carried by the wind. Kael's face softened just for a moment. But then he attacked again, this time with full force. The clash of metal filled the air like thunder. Ethan's armor broke, his skin bleeding from shallow cuts. But he didn't fall. He remembered Lyra's voice, soft and trembling. "You promised you'd stay." That memory became his strength. With a roar, Ethan dodged another strike and swept Kael's legs out from under him. The general hit the ground hard, his blade flying from his hand. Ethan raised his spear to end it, but then stopped. He threw the weapon aside. "I won't kill you." This was never about that. Silence fell over the arena. Kael stared at him in disbelief. "You spare your enemy?" Ethan nodded, panting. "Because Lyra doesn't need another death to haunt her dreams. She needs peace. We all do." For a long moment, Kael said nothing. Then slowly he knelt, bowing his head. "This human," he said loudly, "has more honor than most warriors I know." The crowd erupted in shouts and cries, some angry, some in awe. Up on the balcony, Lyra's eyes filled with tears. She turned to her mother. "He did it. He won." Queen Celira rose, her long silver gown shimmering. She looked down at Ethan, her voice calm but powerful. "The trial of honor is complete. The bond stands. The human has proven his worth before gods and people alike." The drums stopped. The silence that followed was sacred. Ethan knelt, exhausted but relieved. The warmth in his chest flared. Lyra's joy, her relief, her love for the man who had saved her. He looked up to see her rushing down the stairs, running straight into his arms. She hugged him tightly, sobbing into his shoulder. "I knew you'd come back," she whispered. Ethan smiled weakly. "Told you, kid." "I don't break promises." Kael approached, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You have my respect, human. Perhaps destiny truly binds you to our kind." Ethan nodded, still holding the trembling princess. Then maybe destiny isn't such a cruel thing after all. The crowd slowly bowed their heads, not to a warrior, but to a man who fought with heart. And high above, the twin moons rose together, shining their gentle light on the bond that no trial could ever break. Weeks passed after the trial of honor. The palace that once watched Ethan with suspicion now greeted him with quiet respect. The people spoke of him as the human who fought for love, not for glory. Ethan had earned his place among the Vulpine, yet peace never came easily to his heart. Every night he stood at the balcony of his room looking at the stars. Beyond them was Earth, his old home, a place filled with noise, dust, and memories he could never forget. He didn't belong there anymore. But he wasn't sure he truly belonged here either. Lyra, however, saw no doubt. To her, Ethan was part of her world, her story, and her heart. She followed him everywhere, laughing, asking questions, trying to learn about humans. Her smile was the light that warmed the palace halls. But even joy can't hide the shadow of fate. One evening, the queen called for Ethan. He found her standing in the royal garden, where silver petals glowed under the moonlight. "Ethan," she said softly, "you have proven your worth. The people trust you now. But there is something you must know." Her golden eyes were calm yet heavy with sorrow. "The bond you share with Lyra, it is growing stronger. Soon it will reach its final stage. When that happens, your soul and hers will be forever connected. If you die, she dies. If she dies, you fade with her." Ethan's breath caught. "Then what am I supposed to do?" Queen Lyra looked away. "There is a ritual, a way to break the bond before it becomes eternal. But if we perform it, your connection to her will end completely. You will forget her and she will forget you. It will protect you both." Her words hit him like a blade. Forget her? Forget the laughter, the trust, the light she had brought into his broken life. He wanted to say yes for her safety, but his heart refused to accept it. Later that night, Lyra found him sitting alone beneath the glowing trees. She ran to him, her tail brushing softly against the grass. "Mother told me," she said quietly, "about the bond." Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on the stars. "She wants to break it." Lyra's eyes shimmered with tears. "Do you want to?" He hesitated. "If it keeps you safe, maybe I should." Lyra grabbed his hand, shaking her head. "No, you don't understand. When I was trapped in that fire, when I thought I'd die, it was your voice that pulled me back. The bond didn't hurt me, it saved me. You saved me. If it means we share pain, then so be it. I don't want to forget you." Her small hand trembled in his, and Ethan felt something inside him crack. He looked into her eyes filled with love so pure it made him forget the wars, the hatred, the loneliness. He pulled her into a hug. "Then I won't forget either." The next morning, the sky turned red, an omen of change. A portal shimmered open in the great courtyard. It was a gift from the royal scholars, a doorway back to Earth. The queen stood beside it, her voice calm but heavy. "If you step through, the bond will fade. You'll be free. But if you stay, the bond will complete under the next moon. You will be one of us, forever tied to her fate." Ethan looked at the glowing portal. Through it, he could see faint images of his old world, cities, soldiers, the empty life he once had. Then he turned toward Lyra, standing beside her mother, her eyes full of tears. "You said destiny binds us," he said softly. "Maybe it does. But destiny gave me a choice." He knelt before Lyra. "And I choose you." The queen lowered her head, silent but understanding. The portal flickered once, and vanished into the air. As the light faded, the bond awakened. A golden glow spread from Ethan's chest to Lyra's, wrapping them both in warmth and light. It was not pain, it was peace. Lyra's tears turned into laughter as the glow faded. "It's done," she whispered. "We're one now." Ethan smiled, his voice soft but sure. "Then I guess this is home." Years later, stories would be told of the human guardian, the man who defied fate to protect a Vulpine princess. Some said he became immortal, his life tied to hers by the golden bond. Others said he still walked the forests under the twin moons, guarding her even in silence. But those who truly saw them together knew the truth. They were not bound by duty, nor by magic. They were bound by choice, a bond stronger than destiny itself. And as the stars glimmered above the silver moon palace, the human and the Vulpine girl stood side by side, two souls from different worlds now forever one.